We're looking at wild harvest edibles. Thou preparest a table before me, part 46 in our series here on edible wild plants. An important note, just as a reminder, as you navigate any health challenge, it's always recommended that you partner with a medical practitioner that shares your philosophy of the care of the human body in disease and in health. And the information that we talk about here is educational in nature and just another tool in the toolbox. We don't talk about medicinal components every single time, but most times we do, because Hippocrates said many years ago that let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. You want to have your healthcare provider be a cooperative partner in your healthcare, and these tools that are in your toolbox, you want to make sure you do your due diligence on any treatment or protocol before jumping into it, blindly accepting it without doing your own due diligence. Thomas Edison said, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patient in the care of the human body frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." Back in 1885, Ellen White stated in the Councils on Diets and Foods that there are many ways of practicing the healing art, but there is only one way that heaven approves. God's remedies are the simple agencies of nature that will not tax or debilitate the system through their powerful properties. Pure air and water, cleanliness, a proper diet, purity of life, and a firm trust in God are remedies for the want of which thousands are dying. Yet these remedies are going out of date because their skillful use requires work that people do not appreciate. Fresh air, exercise, pure water, and a clean, sweet premises are within the reach of all, with but little expense. But drugs are expensive, both in the outlay of means and the effect produced upon the system. In 3 John 1, verse 2, he states, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." And your soul is an important thing to take part in the whole equation of the body. Paul states in Romans 12, 1 and 2, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God." Tonight, our first plant of interest is Arrowhead, also known as Wapato, Sagittaria species. There's lots of different Sagittaria, and they all have similar properties associated with them. So it has a number of different names, also known as duck potato. It's an herbaceous aquatic perennial. So during the winter time, it'll die back. It won't have the foliage present. It'll just be the stalks from the seed pods sticking up, and the leaves will pretty much die away and then become detritus and sink to the bottom of the lake. But it grows in calm waters all across the United States and worldwide. In North America, the variety that is most common and preferred is Sagittaria latifolia. When you're looking for them, the flowers are on an erect stalk. You can see the flowers in the lower right picture. They have 2 to 3 whorls of small white flowers, and that stalk can be up to 4 feet tall. There's 3 petals. You can see those 3 petals in the picture below, and it blooms from July to September. It's interesting that it has a dioecious flower, basically saying that it's not a complete flower, in that it has a male and a female flower. So when we have dioecious plants, typically they have 2 houses or 2 plants, a male plant and a female plant. But this has the male and the female flower on the same plant. They're just separate flowers. So the male flower has the busy yellow center. You can see the upper 2 flowers are the male flower, and that would have the pollen associated with it. And the female flower is just below it, has the green center to it. It appears that the female flowers grow on the same level together, and the males on their own level, and they may alternate. Don't have a full sequence here of flowers. The leaves have a deep shine, a green arrow-shaped leaf. You can see that in the upper picture. The water has gone down here a little bit below these leaves. Many times the water is right up underneath them, and they will grow up from the under the water and then come and penetrate the surface, and their main presence is above the water. The submerged leaves are narrower. The top leaves are nice and broad. So there's a variety of sizes available. The leaves above the water are up to 14 inches long and 10 inches wide. So they're bright, quite broad leaves. They have smooth edges, so they aren't toothed, and they have visible veins in the leaves. So you can see that there's quite a wide distribution across the United States, all the way across the US. Looks like the only dark spot is Nevada there. But the component that's edible is the rootstock and the tubers. You can see the person here holding the rootstock in their hands from some pretty mucky looking mud there that they've used to pull up from the place where they grow. Raw, they're rather unpleasant. You typically want to roast them or use them. You can dry them fresh for a while, store them fresh. You can dry them for storage like you would a potato, just dry them and they'll maintain their moisture content. But typically they grow underwater, so they would need to be kind of have some of the water dried out of them. So if you wash them and keep them raw in a cool storage, they'll store for several months like potatoes. So essentially you want to use them like you would a potato. So peel them, you can mash them, you can roast them, you can bake them, you can boil them, you can even powder them and use them as potato flour. So you can see a basil cluster there, the central photo with the flowers coming up from them and the flower stalk there on the right. So this is the arrowhead or wapato. So a recipe that you would use, so you can see another size of the rootstock here in this person's hand on the left, and the flower in the center, and a young person having collected a number of them in a perforated tray. And then below you can see the veins in the arrowhead leaf there that make it quite prominent. So here's a recipe, wapato chowder, or otherwise known as arrowhead. So 2 cups of diced arrowhead or wapato root, that's what's in the person's hand on the left, a 1/2 cup of finely diced celery, 3/4 of a cup of finely diced onion, 2 cups of water, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Put that all together and cook that until tender. And while you're doing that, you can put together the cashew rice milk, 1/3 a cup of raw cashews and 2 cups of warm water, 1/2 cup of cooked rice, and 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast flakes. Blend that until it's smooth, which is about 5 minutes. So once that's done and once your vegetables are tender, just add the cashew rice milk that you've just made, just pour it over the wapato and serve. So you're not going to do any additional cooking that may end up making it into a mush. So just go ahead and serve it right away. Some medicinal benefits. You can make a tea from the roots. This can help indigestion, and primarily probably because of the fibers that are present. The fiber creates a good bacterial environment in the colon. You can make a mashed root poultice that can help wound healing, much like a potato. So a potato can do the same thing, pulling infection out of a wounded area. And you can also make a poultice out of the leaves. It can help to stop lactation during weaning if you need a more rapid lactation, which could be helpful because sometimes that can be a painful process for the mother too. It also has been demonstrated to have some anti-fungal effects. Anti-fungal isopyrimidine diterpenoids from Sagittaria latifolia, and that it's from Rayo et al. In Plant Medica in 2014. So there's some different medicinal properties that could be beneficial at different levels as well. Our next one is the common pond lily here in the Pacific Northwest. It also grows across much of North America and the world. Nufar lutea, also known as polysepalum. When I went through botany, it was referred to as polysepalum, which basically just means many sepals, but looks like the name has changed a little bit to lutea. We commonly have changes in species names and or genus names, so something that can be difficult to keep up with. It's also known as cow lily or yellow pond lily or brandy bottle. They say that smelling the flower, the scent of the flower smells a little bit like brandy, hence the name brandy bottle. It's another aquatic plant. So we're looking at 2 aquatic plants this evening. It's found in shallow marshes, ponds, swamps, lakes, and slow rivers. It grows up to 3 feet. So that's approximately the depth of the water in which it grows. It's not going to grow in very deep water. It'll grow in water about 3 feet deep. That way it has good light penetration down to the rootstock in the ground. And the rhizome can spread out to 6 feet horizontally. The seed pods appear as little flasks. And again, the flowers smell like brandy. The flowers are small, but they smell like brandy. So the flower, it emerges from a separate upright stem. You can see that upright stem coming there in the upper picture, sticking above the water. It's aerial, meaning that it's up in the air above the water. Very bright yellow, 2.5 inches in size, very thick, waxy, rounded petals. And it closes up in the afternoon. So in the morning, it'll open up and be quite broad. These are kind of tight blossoms. It's a pretty common way to see it. I've seen it paddling in inland lakes, but it tends to close up towards the afternoon. The seed pods are rather fat, up to 1/2 inch long, with numerous slimy seeds when fresh. So when it's green and fresh, the seeds are slimy. But later on, they will dry up. It's in a watery environment, but they will actually self-seed and kind of release their seeds. So if you want to collect them, you want to collect them before they release the seeds. You can actually collect the seeds when they're in their slimy state too. So it flowers from March through October. So it has leaves that are variable in size and shape. They're often quite large. You can see that they have kind of a heart shape to them, and they're kind of fan shaped. They're not nearly as pointed as the arrowhead. Another key factor is the flowers are distinctly different. There's a single flower at the surface versus many flowers on a stalk, but they're both considered edible. 4 to 15 inches in diameter on the leaves, with very long stems that can extend down to the bottom of the pond. So there's more edible on this than there is in the Wapato. The roots, the young leaves, the stems, and the seeds are all edible in the Nuphar polycephalum or luteum. So you can see the flower stalk there in the center picture, where the flowers or the leaves would have been pulled off the stalk in different places. And the lower picture there on the right shows one that has been extracted from the bottom of the pond where it grows. So the roots can be used. The young leaves can be added to various foodstuffs. You're not going to probably eat them raw, but you may cook them. And the stems can be cut up and used, so that the stem is going to be the portion that is between the leaf and where it attaches to the root, and then the seeds. So the seeds are rather mucilaginous in nature. You can see them here from an opened up flower pod. These are in the green state. They can be harvested here and then dried further. So gathering it while you have it before it releases the seeds, clean the seeds, and then dry it for an additional period of time. You could put them in a dehydrator or just in a sunny place to allow them to dry. And one way to eat those seeds is to pop them. So I've seen various different preparations of popped water lily seeds, which is what you see on the right here. You can place them in a lidded pan. You can use oil or do them sans oil. That's what we do. We usually don't use any oil, but you shake them continuously over heat. You may be able to use them in an airless popper. I'm not sure how well they bounce around, if they're as lively as popcorn. But the seeds don't literally pop like popcorn, but they do puff and crack open. And then you can see them with salt or nutritional yeast or whatever your favorite seasoning is for those seeds. So some tips: when you're harvesting, make sure the water source is pure. Like anything that's growing in the water, and even things that are growing in other places, you want to make sure that there aren't herbicides and chemicals and other pollutants that are going to be a part of their physiology as they take up the nutrients from the places where they grow and live. The flower or the seed pod is actually being shown in the upper picture here. It's missing its petals and sepals, and the seeds are going to be inside that capsule there. The young leaves are excellent in soups. You just chop them up and put them into soups. The roots can be eaten. You can peel them and boil them in several changes of water, and roast them and dry them, and then you can pound them into flour. It tends to be a bitter, very tannic and very bitter. That's why you would do the multiple water changes when boiling, help to reduce that. Harvest in the spring. for collection purposes. The seeds, you can use them cooked, you can use them fried or popped. Harvest them when the pods turn brown in the fall. And if you don't collect them in time, they will self-seed themselves spontaneously before you get to them. So it's okay to get them a little sooner before they're completely dry, and then just dry them out. So they'll swell and crack open the seeds when they are exposed to heat. So a warning, you want to consume them in moderation. This shouldn't be like a staple of your diet, but it could certainly be a part of it. It may be poisonous if used in excessive quantity. And the white pond lily, Nymphea tuberosa, is not edible. So the flowers are going to be your confirming piece of evidence as to the difference. The thing to be aware of is that they don't flower year round. So you'd want to pay attention to that. I also don't believe that they grow in mixed stands. I've not seen them growing in the same area at the same time, but it's not impossible. But the thing to watch for is you don't eat the white. If you eat the white, you'll be out of sight. So stick with the yellow and stick with the arrowhead. Some medicinal properties, has some cooling and soothing properties, has some astringent qualities, and good as a wound poultice. So on wounds, that astringent nature is beneficial because it tends to draw the wound together. That's one of the roles of it. A journal article that referred to this was Nufar lutea extracts exhibit an antiviral activity against the measles virus from Wiener et al. In the journal Molecules in 2020, April 2020. So, and chances are if it's going to function against measles virus, it'll probably function against other said viruses. In addition to that, the roots have a variety of different roles: aphrodisiac, anodyne, anti-scrofulatic, astringent, again pulling things together, cardiotonic, so heart health, demulcent, and as a sedative. A tea made from the roots is used in the treatment of sexual irritability and blood diseases and chills. The roots as a poultice can be applied to various swellings. So like the potato will help draw out different toxins from diseased tissue, other inflammations and cuts. So it's very helpful in that. The root contains steroids. It's a folk remedy for infertility. And there are alkaloids in the root. And if you consume them in excess, there could be potential toxicity associated with it. So another thing to consume in moderation, but to know that is available to be part of a larger culinary perspective. So it can be hypotensive, essentially meaning that it has a blood pressure lowering effect, antispasmodic, basically helping muscles not to contract spasmodically, cardiac, tonic, and as a vasoconstrictor. And you can look again at preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com if you'd like to review this presentation again. And that's looking at two different plants, the arrowhead, and otherwise known as wapato, and at the yellow pond lily, Nufar lutea.